This video is about simple interest. So we're going to be talking about banks, and we have to remember that banking is a business and businesses are in business to make money. So how does a bank make money? Well, what they do is they use your money to give to other people money, and they make money on both sides of that. So how does that work? Well, you take money to the bank. You can have a savings account. As an adult, you sometimes have your payroll checks deposited there, all different kinds of ways. And then they'll charge different amounts of interest to you, and they'll give it to you. So they may give you 2% on the money that you give them, that you keep there over time. Now, they're trying to entice you to leave your money with them. Now, what do they do with this money? Well, what they do with this money is they give it out. Now, that may seem funny, like they're taking your money and giving it away, but they're not really giving it away because people need money to buy bigger items like houses and cars, which we know cost quite a bit of money. So what you're doing is you give your money to the bank. The bank will give you like a low percent interest, like 1 or 2%. And then they'll turn around and take your money and loan it to somebody who may be buying a house or a car and charging them anywhere from 4% to 8 or 10%. So they can make on any loan amount the difference between 2 and 6% on all the money. So that's the money that they make. Because remember, at the end of the day, they're there to make money. So now that we understand what does interest really mean, there is a formula that goes with it, and we can tear it apart a little bit and talk about the different parts. So here's the formula for simple interest. It's I equals P times R times T. So when we're all next to each other like this, that means that we're going to multiply whatever values that we're going to put in those places. So let's break this down a little bit, this formula. So the I is going to stand for the interest. That's money. So the money that they would pay you when you loan them your money, right? When you deposit it. Or that's the interest, that's the amount of money they're going to get, the bank's going to get by loaning you money, like for a car or something like that. So that's the I. The interest is dollars. P is the principal, and the principal is also dollar amount, and this is the amount that you invest or borrow. So we notice that that's on the other side of the equal sign. There is the rate, which reflects the percentage rate of which the interest is being charged, and that's always written like a decimal. So if we were to get something like 3%, we would change that to be 300ths. Now, you also know that when we write percent, we'd write per over cent, right? And this is always 100. If you took a look and say what 300ths were, this is what it looks like. Some of us might remember from 5th grade when they told us to take a percent, and what we would do is drop the percent, sorry about that, drop the percent sign and take that decimal and move it 2 places over and add a decimal there. So there's different ways to come to that, but we want to be looking that the rate always needs to be written as a decimal. So that's really, really, really important. And the last thing is time. And time is always in years. So when we get something that's not 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, maybe it's 6 months or maybe it's 3 months. So let's say it was 6 months. Well, 6 months, that's 6 out of 12 months, isn't it? So 6 out of 12 months is a half, which represents as a decimal 0.5. We can also do that when we talk about 3 months, because 3 months out of 12 months would reflect the same fraction as 1 over 4, which would for us be 0.25, 25 hundredths. So we'd be looking to see and changing that to be a decimal as well if we need to. You know, it could be 2 years or 3 years and we're just using that number. So we need to make sure what we're putting into the formula. So time is always years, and the rate is always a decimal. So that's a really big concept. And the interest and principal are always the money. So let's take a look at 4 problems and how we would use this formula. So here in example number 1, it states, you have a $1,000 savings account which is earning 6% per year. how much interest is there after 2 years, and how much total after 2 years. So we've got two questions going on in there. So we're going to take our formula, I equals PRT, which is the interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. And we're going to take information and we're going to put it in here and figure out what's going on. So we're trying to find out how much interest there is. So we're looking for I. If we're looking for the I is going to stay. We're not going to do anything with that because that's going to stay for us. Now we're going to read this description one more time and see if we can find the principal. Well, the principal is going to be money. And when we're reading this here, we see that this is really the only money right here is this $1,000 savings. So we're going to take that number, that $1,000 savings, and I'm going to put it in parentheses because remember I had mentioned to you earlier that we were going to multiply all these things together. So I'm going to drop another one here, and then we're going to take a look at what could the, looking at my highlighter, getting another color, what could the rate be? So the rate here is 6%. And we have to remember that when we talk about the rate, we have to change it to be a decimal. So when we're talking 6%, that's going to change to be 600ths. And the last thing we're going to look at is time. And let's see if I can get a lighter color highlighter. Let's see if that'll work. So here we have time, and this is time. So we're going to tie that together. And since it's in years already, which is great because we need to put it in years, we're going to put it times 2. So basically we've got the interest is going to be the principal, which is $1,000 times the 6% per year, which is 600ths, and we're going to multiply it times 2 years. So I'm going to bring my calculator in here so you can kind of see what I'm doing, hopefully. Thought I could, but it's going to take up too much room, I think. But I'll do it off to the side here. Oops, sorry about that. And I'm going to multiply 1,000 times 600ths times 2. And when I multiply all of that together, I'm going to get 120. Now, we have to remember that interest is money. So we know that this reflects $120. Now, that answers our first question, which our first question was, how much interest is there after 2 years? So that's our first question right there, and there's our first answer. Our second question says, how much total after 2 years? So how much money do we have total after 2 years? So in order to find that, and this is our second question, we're going to take the $1,000 that was invested and the $120 interest. We're going to add that together and we get $1,120. So we've been able to answer both parts. Now this example number 1 is pretty typical of what you need to understand about simple interest. We're going to dive in a little bit more. We're going to make some changes on this next problem to make sure that you can comprehend what can happen. So here it says, if you borrow $250 at 3.5% interest per year, how much interest do you pay for 6 months? So once again, we know we're going to use our formula of I equals PRT. Now, we were looking at earlier about principal, right? So here's principal, and here's that I'm going to borrow $250. So what I'm going to do is in the P spot, I am going to drop 250. Now, since I'm looking for the interest rate, I'm going to keep the I, and then what I'm going to look for next is the rate. Now, when I look for the rate here, I have 3.5%. Now, remember, I've got to be able to change that 3.5% into a decimal. So I'm going to drop the percent sign, and I'm going to shift it by 2 decimal places. So I find out that it's 35 thousandths or 3.5 hundredths, remember, per hundred. And then my last thing I'm going to get here is time. And we know that time here is 6 months, so it's not going to be the number 6 here. This is a half of a year. This is 6 months out of 12 months. So 1/2 we would show as a decimal as 0.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my calculator and multiply 250 times 0.035 times 5. And I get this number. I get 4 375 thousandths. Now, here's the thing we have to make. Remember, interest is money. Okay, and so we need to make this look like money. So there's too many decimal places here. So I'm going to draw a line right there, and we're going to evaluate this. This 5 tells us that we need to round this 7 up. So this would become $4.38. And that's how much interest would be paid for 6 months at 3.5% interest if you were to borrow $250. Now, both of those problems are pretty straightforward. What we're going to do in this next one is we're going to look for something different. So here it says you made $1,600 interest on an $8,000 investment for 1 year. What percentage rate did you invest at? So what we don't know is the percentage rate. We are looking for that letter R. We have no idea what that is. So if we remember our formula of I equals PRT, and we put in what we know. So we've got $2 amounts here, so we've got to look for keywords. So I'm going to read through this again. You made $1,600 in interest. See, that tells you interest. We're going to take that and we're going to put it into the I spot. And then this $8,000 investment, that's our principal. That's what we're going to put into that. So that's going to be our principal. So we're going to put that here, our 8,000. And we said before we don't know what the R is, so we're going to leave an R there. And then the time we have here, it's 1 year, so we're going to use the number 1. Now I can simplify what's going on the right because I know that 8,000 times 1 happens to be 8,000. And then the other side has 1,600. Now let's read what this is saying. It's saying that there's some number R. If I multiplied it times 8,000, I would get 1,600. Well, if you know anything about numbers, the number 2 is popping into your head a little bit. But if I multiplied 8,000 by 2, I'd get 16,000. So I want a little less than 2. I want a decimal point less. So it's really going to be 2/10. Now another way to look at this, if you know something about equations already, is we're going to isolate that variable by dividing both sides by 1,000, because we know that 8,000 over 8,000 equals 1, and 1 times anything is just what that is. So we're going to call this R. And if you use a calculator and you did 1,600 divided by 8,000, you would get 2/10. So the question is, what is the percentage rate? Well, it isn't 2/10%. Remember, we have to move that decimal 2 places. We need to move it 1, 2, and then turn it into a percent. So our answer to this question is that it is a 20% investment rate. I'm going to tell you, as an economics major, if you find something with that kind of investment, please invest. You'd make some serious money there. All right, one last question. Example number 4. Again, this is going to be one where we're going to look for something different. It says you made $2,100 on an investment after 3 months at 7%. How much did you invest? So what we're missing this time when we're asking how much did you invest, we are looking for the principal. We don't know how much that is. So when we're using our formula of I equals PRT, we know since we're looking for that investment, that P is going to stay. There's no number in this sentence that we can help us to put into that equation to figure out what's going on. So let's start to put things in the right place. It says you'd made $2,100 on an investment. Well, that automatically goes into interest. So we're going to drop that right there. We said we don't know what the P is, so we're going to leave the P alone. We do have a rate. The rate here is 7%. We need to change 7% into a decimal. So that's going to be 7/100 because that's 7 per 100. And then our time, most people want to write down 3 months, but really it's 3 months out of 12 months, isn't it? So 3 out of 12 is the same as 1 out of 4, or one quarter, right? So let's write 1/4 as a decimal, which would be 25/100. So now if I took my calculator and I multiplied 7/100 times 25/100, I would get this lovely decimal that I'm going to write for you right now. I'm going to get P times 0.0175, okay? That's 175 10,000ths in case anyone was interested. So now I have to think. I've got to get a number and multiply it times this decimal to get 2,100. It's going to be a large number, isn't it? Because this is very small. In order to get 2,100, it's going to be pretty big. Remember a moment ago I told you that whatever number is being multiplied by on this side, we're just going to divide it on the other side. So we're going to take our 2,100 and we're going to divide it by 0.0175 on my calculator. Hang on one second. 2100 divided by 0.0175, and we get an answer of 120,000. Now remember, principal is money, right? So we need to change that to be $120,000. So if we had invested $120,000 for 3 months at 7%, we would have made $2,100 worth of interest. So hopefully understanding this formula and knowing how it all works, this is what's going to help you to understand basically about banking. Again, there are other types of interest formulas, but this is one we're going to concern ourselves primarily with. Hope that this explains simple interest.